Shami, can I ask you two questions that seem to come out of that? One of which is, Tony Wright, a rather good Labour MP, thoughtful Labour MP, recently gave a lecture in which he said basically the problem was in Britain was culture, not rules. And there is a very complicated relationship between the culture into which such legal innovations, how they change the temperature, how they change things. What's your view on that?
Well, I think Tony Wright was right in that, and in that part of Nick's commentary, he was right too. You know, legal instruments by themselves do not change behaviour. I mean, you can, I suppose, pass enough laws and enforce them with such steel that a certain portion of your population will live in terror. But I don't think that's ever going to be desperately effective. And nor would I want that to be the means of changing people's behaviour. You need to look at MPs' expenses, dare I say it, to know that to know that it's possible to be all for law and order and moral rectitude and legal rectitude, and then to have rules, and then to turn around and say, well, I had a second home and it was not where most people would think it was, and I was claiming for this, that and the other in the kitchen sink, but it's okay because it was in the rules. And I think this is relevant to free speech as well, actually. One of the incredibly unfortunate but maybe inevitable byproducts of a very authoritarian time, and I think we have, in relative terms in Britain recently, been living in a very authoritarian time, is that you can actually infantilise people. You can pass so many rules and regulations that you have, really serious people, cabinet ministers say, it was okay because I checked the rules and therefore my behaviour was okay, when patently it wasn't. When patently it wasn't to people up and down the land. And I think that's, that can be relevant to speech as well, because my experience of the right of free speech is that mine is free and yours is a little more expensive. Yeah. So we all love our own. And know how important it is, but it's other people's that's challenging, inevitably difficult, and sometimes we create the one right that doesn't exist and must never exist, which is the right not to be offended, which is desperately dangerous. But I mean, Nick's very careful not to sort of pass any blame at government's door, and maybe I'm always too ready to place blame at government's door. But it's not just group. It's not just religious groups or other groups that do this. Government's been a little, and as he suggested, government didn't do enough when that scandal of Beheshti took place in December of 2003, January of 2004, when as he said, a young Sikh woman of religious conviction herself, as luck would have it, rights a play. And who is it that comes for her? It is a baying mob. And you have a government that, whether I've always agreed with them or not, the one thing they say they've stood for is law and order. And the baying mob comes, and the cops don't come to help, and the ministers don't even speak up for her. And it was a terrible moment. But government can send signals sometimes by legislation. And what I have seen in terms of the statute book in recent years is a number of really quite dangerous speech offences. And frankly, now everybody wants one.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, at a time when the Muslim community was understandably very concerned about the fallout of 9/11, that everybody was going to get blamed, and some people were getting attacked on the streets of this country. It's a very, very difficult time for the Muslim community. We had some people locked up indefinitely without trial, without police interview, let alone charge or conviction. We had the war about to start, etc., etc. And the Muslim Council of Great Britain decided to place all its political capital, and it was very close to government at the time, in one thing, and that was they wanted a speech offence called incitement to religious hatred, which the former Secretary of General said to his supporters was a new blasphemy offence. Okay, and I think that was a terrible mistake. But all of the political capital that they had with government, which was considerable, almost as a trade-off for things like the Belmarsh policy, etc., all of it went into the speech offence. And then after the London atrocity, the bombings of 7/7, that incitement to religious hatred offence being on the statute book, government responded with another offence called glorification of terrorism. And the same people who had lobbied for offence number 1 now said, what about free speech? You know, I wanted a right not to be offended when people critiqued my religion, but now I want free speech because, you know, somebody could say something ridiculous like George Bush is the real terrorist, and they might be prosecuted for glorification of terrorism. And then to add, you know, it's almost a modern morality tale, because then the gentleman himself, who had lobbied for all of these things, went on the radio, gave his views about gay people, and someone phoned the police saying that he'd used threatening and abusive language in public. And further speech offences have followed, and now there's a danger that every group says, give me a speech offence. And I think where I'd agree with Nick is I don't agree that the judiciary just hate free speech. So, I mean, it's a complicated business, the tension between privacy and speech. And there's no doubt that, you know, there is a right to free speech in the Convention and in the Human Rights Act. And if it's not adequately protected, the Human Rights Act does not trump primary legislation, so it would be open to governments supported by newspaper tycoons who hate the Human Rights Act, largely because celebrities have used it to get injunctions to protect their privacy. You know, the Human Rights Act cannot trump primary legislation, so there is a debate Sorry, I was talking about libel rather than sure.
It's